Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice-Hughes. You'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of our podcast, Internet Safety. And I am your host, Donna Rice-Hughes. And we have a really exciting show for you. We're going to cover two main topics. And one is some breaking news regarding big tech being held accountable and responsible and liable. But first, I want to introduce my guest, Tanya Gould. Tanya is a human dignity strategist and a systems advisor on exploitation and protection. And she also has an amazing story from horrible situation when she was trafficked as a young girl to now an advocate and a warrior to protect others. Tanya, welcome. Welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you so much, Donna, for having me. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you. So Tanya, you and I first met, the first time we met was when you were working with Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares. Isn't that the first time we met?
I believe so.
I think so. Why don't you tell our viewers what your role was with the AG?
Absolutely. So at the time, I was director of anti-human trafficking for the Office of the Attorney General in Virginia. And so people are like, you're a survivor of human trafficking. How did you get there? So I ran for Virginia House of Delegates in 2021, along with former Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares, former governor, Youngkin, and Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears. We all ran on the same ticket. And of course, my platform was all about human trafficking and the harms of human trafficking, protecting, our children, our communities. And I lost that race by a really small margin. So I lost only by 340 votes. Yeah.
Small margin.
The office, the administration, the executive team decided to bring me in and let me lead and guide the state's response on human trafficking efforts, and it was a joy of my life to be able to do that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I didn't realize that, but I knew Glenn Youngkin prior to him running for governor, and Winsome Sears when she just put in her hat for the race for lieutenant governor, and she and I became friends. And I'm going to deter just a little bit because I think it's kind of a cute story. So we're at this big event, and I see this gal standing all by herself over near the coffee where they were serving coffee and stuff. And she has on this name badge that says Winsome Earl Sears. Earl was the key. Her middle name is Earl, E-A-R-L-E. And I went up to her and I said, "Hi, Winsome Earl Sears. I bet you have never met anyone who has the same middle name as you." She said, "No, I haven't." "Hi, I'm Donna Earl Rice."
Well, I did not know that.
So we
That's
became
awesome.
instant friends, and I love her, and Jason Miyares. Well, I mean, we did some great stuff together. We were so honored to work with you and your team to actually put together 3 community town halls about protecting kids online.
Yeah. It was wonderful watching parents ask really good questions, right? Because sometimes when you're presenting and you're talking about things that are heavy, people are not sure how to process all the information and then ask good follow-up questions. But I just looking back on it, even then just looking at how we were able to bring in our law enforcement partners, bring you in and really talk about solutions to helping to keep your families and your kids safe and what parents can actually do practically. It was just, parents were able to digest the information and ask really good questions and great follow-up afterwards. So it was very, very productive and beneficial to our community.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for your leadership on that. So we're going to talk about, before we get to your story, we're going to talk a little bit about some breaking news and that I am very excited about, and I know you are too, and I'm sure our listeners will be as well. Okay, so we've had 2 jury verdicts just come in. All right, we're going to talk about these. So the first one is the New Mexico verdict. So in this case, the Attorney General for New Mexico brought a lawsuit against Meta. And here's what they found. They found, this is stunning to me, Tanya, over 500,000 children were targeted with sexual messages per day on Facebook. Okay, 500,000 children were targeted with sexual messages per day on Facebook. They also, and now here's what's interesting about these cases, and I'm just going to determine it. When there's depositions like this, we can actually get in and find out what was really going on. Okay. This is why this is so important. Okay. The next thing that the evidence showed was that 7.5 million child sex abuse material reports. Now, what is that? That's the depiction of children being raped, tortured, brutalized, sexually abused, and sexually exploited. We used to call it child pornography. Okay, 7.5 million reports were not disclosed. Were not disclosed because Zuckerberg and his team decided they were not going to disclose these reports until they were end-to-end encrypted on their messenger. That's just stunning. These are probably most likely real children. Now there could be some AI generated kids in there,
of course,
but I mean, to me, Tanya, that's just pure evil. And I'm going to get to the next point. Then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Instagram's former head of safety also said that the policy of Meta was that they would not remove an account where there was a suspicion of sex trafficking unless it was reported at least 17 times. They needed 17 reports of the same incident in order to deal with it. Now, those three facts just got me. And I'm like, throw the book at them. And they did.
Yeah.
At them. And, okay, so 375 million.
Yeah.
This is well beyond a slap on the wrist. So Tanya, take it away. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Meta misled users and parents, right? In regards to like how safe their platforms really are, right? And so second, they fail to protect children from sexual exploitation, right? And then so when you talk about the 17 times, right? It was about this platform that was designed with algorithms that helped connect predators to minors, and you make money off of that.
Yes.
So they were benefiting from misleading users and parents, from protecting children and connecting predators to minors. They were benefiting off of that. And I think that's the biggest story, because when we're talking about human trafficking, it's about benefiting off of someone's vulnerability and exploiting that for your own gain. And so that's what happened here. And so, and obviously internal warnings existed, but they just were not acted on. There was no one shining a light and holding accountability. And that's the whole issue. And when we're talking about accountability, that goes back into, how are people being bought and sold in the first place? Well, there's no accountability, right? And so in many other industries, there's accountability, right? There's that duty of care we are now hearing a lot more of right now when it comes to the social media platforms and what the expectation should be with this industry as well, right? So, yeah, I believe that this now is a small but large step into getting ahead of this, because AI is going to continue. It's going to continue to grow, and we have to, make sure that we're protecting the next generation of leaders.
Well, you're absolutely right, and this generation of children, right? Because as you know, as a survivor, as I know from my own experiences with sexual exploitation as a kid and as an adult, those traumas are still there. There can be a lot of healing, obviously, and you overcome, but kids are being exploited every day. Kids are dying. Kids are dying, and we're going to talk about that. I mean, there are suicides, there's sextortion, there's, all kinds of things going on. And we know these companies have known about it. They know their platforms are not safe. They are not doing enough. Some bad press doesn't normally move the needle too much, and a little bit of legislation here and there hasn't moved the needle that much. And that's why I'm so excited about these lawsuits. We're going to talk about this next lawsuit too, because they care about their bottom line. They care about negative publicity. So the next lawsuit was the California lawsuit. We call it really the social media addiction lawsuit. So what happened here? A plaintiff, KGM, sued several social media companies. It was Meta and YouTube, and then also TikTok and Snapchat. TikTok and Snapchat were very wise to settle out of court, and I am sure they're glad that they did. But Meta and Google were not. Oh no, they said we're going to go to court, and they got lambasted with all this disclosure, with all this negative press, and I think it really hit them. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So the decision just came down, $6 million to the plaintiff. Right now, that's good. And here's what they did out there, and you probably know this, Tanya, but I just learned this when I was reading some of the case files. It's been really hard for cases to get brought against these platforms because of the Communications Decency Act, Section 230. And I was very involved when that was initially passed and put into law. It was originally designed to protect, internet service providers like AOL back then, it's way before social media, who were putting filters on to protect kids from getting pornography. That was the whole thing. And that if they got through the filters, the kids, then those AOL wouldn't be liable. Okay, that was the whole purpose of 230. It's been so misused and abused for all these years and all these decades to where it has been now, where these companies say, okay, so there's child porn on my platform. So girls and women are being sold, for sex on my platform. Well, I'm not responsible, and I'm not liable, and I'm not taking it down. But they've been able to hide behind the shield of 230. What these lawyers did, and I found this fascinating, they said, we're not going to make it about content. We're going to make it about the design and the architecture of the platforms, and it worked. It was a brilliant strategy. So $6 million to the plaintiff. So, Tanya, share your thoughts.
Totally with you on that. I'm gonna go back to like we the people. Me running for office, like I mentioned earlier, I did that so that I could represent and protect, and just be a representative for people, right? And so, because I believe in we the people, right? And well, what about that do I believe in? I believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if it's not going to benefit the soul, the dignity of a human being, then why are we doing it? Trying to hide behind, like Section 230, we're not responsible for user content. So then they design, or, they use product design and, and company behavior, right? To build something to make money off of, like they're finding a loophole to still disregard human dignity, right? To disregard we the people. And it feels powerless when it comes to, folks that are in office, where they may feel like, these big tech keeps kind of like finding loopholes where I can't, what can I do? I almost feel helpless where I can't protect the people that I serve. And the truth is that AI, is going to continue, right? It's going to continue to unfold. It's going to continue to, like Pandora's box, right? It's going to continue to do this. And if we cannot begin to really get some traction here, then why run for office? Like, why have a democracy or a democratic process, to protect people, right? Or to bring people's voices up when, before, this type of system worked, but now it's not working because big tech has, it's like we the big tech, you know, versus we the people, and we want to, protect big tech because there's so much happening here, but they're the biggest trafficker, right? Traffickers love big tech. And so we just have to really continue. This is just really small but big. But I love that the precedent has been set in some way where we can begin to, continue to build forward from this. So, age restrictions, you're right. Like there's like this, deeper issues when it comes to algorithms and their harmfulness and, how kids are being, are the profit from this is prioritized. That's the problem, right? And really saying, because that's what we've been saying all along when it comes to human trafficking, period, right? That there's a profit to be made. And remember back in the day when we were talking about human trafficking, we were like, human traffickers are making more than Nike and, all these companies combined. Like we've been yelling this at the rooftop. That we have surpassed Nike and Amazon, and it's gone much further than that.
Yeah, it's even worse. I mean, when I kind of, the way I like to frame this, Tanya, is that first of all, we're fighting a war on multiple fronts. We're fighting multi-billion-dollar companies like big tech. Most every one of them is worth several $billions at least. Okay, they're bigger than most small world countries, right? And they control the narrative. They control what people are seeing. They control the news. They control all this stuff. We know that they're putting profits over safety. That's an obvious that certainly was just exposed in these two cases, and also in Senate hearings, et cetera, et cetera. But we're also fighting a I don't know how big the trafficking industry is, but I imagine it's tens of billions, or not hundreds of billions of dollars. Who knows?
Absolutely.
You can talk to me about that. We know that the child, I'm going to call it the child pornography industry because most people understand that term, is billions and billions and billions of dollars. The largest number of reports ever of cases of child sex abuse material were just reported last year to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And it's exploding. Financial sextortion of kids. It's one of the fastest growing crimes. Okay, we're fighting the pornography industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So in trafficking, so you combine all of this, I mean, this is a huge war. And we're fighting for the dignity and the safety of children and the dignity and safety of all of us, young women, young men, and all of us who are fighting these wars, because it's really a spiritual war and there's a lot of
It
evil in
is.
here, and that's what we're dealing with.
When you were talking, I was just thinking about how this isn't really just about content, right? It's about systems in place, right? That continually, like before, it was subtle, but now because of the internet, it's louder. So systems that shape behavior and exposure, right? Where we could say users were making bad choices, right? But now, we're saying that platforms engineered environments where harm was predictable.
Oh, and they knew it. One of the things that came out, and I love this line because I think it's so descriptive, is that by the way these algorithms are deliberately programmed to hook users, hook kids, and their little brains are not fully formed until they're 25. I know every 15-year-old thinks they've got a fully formed frontal cortex, but we as parents know that they don't. Okay,
Right.
but they call these are like digital casinos.
Yes.
And it's hard for us to break
Yeah.
away from screen time, right? If
No.
you're looking for a cute little black dress to go to a party and you find it, and then all of a sudden, how many ads are you getting for cute little black dresses over the next, so that's kind of the same way this works, but just with some of the negative stuff.
Yeah. And, wouldn't it be great if we had a world that pushed a dignity narrative, right? Like we're human beings made in the imago Dei, right? And we are, like when you push us beyond our potential, that doesn't look at or speak to our sexual identity or sexual expression, or, you know, expressing ourselves in that way only, right? That there are other aspects of the human being that are quite remarkable and innovative and creative, and how far we really can go as a human race, right? Together. Like, I think that's a narrative. It would be great if we were having that argument versus, or that debate. It wouldn't even be an argument. It would be like, I don't know, it'd be something else. But I'd love to have that debate than, trying to, where it feels like an uphill. It is an uphill battle. It has been for generations, where, industries are profiting off our vulnerabilities and offering us things that are against, in my opinion, the Imago Dei, the nature of, us. I was in the Uber one time. I was talking to the person, we were talking about human trafficking, and he was like, well, it's just, it's just so, like, his response was he wanted to like violently attack these bad people, right? And I said, you can handle evil with good. And I said, it's easier to be good than it is to be bad. But people are often discouraged because of the response they get from being good. Like, good is not a good thing, and it's better to be bad. But it's up to you about what you want to believe about yourself and about humanity. But everyone has the potential to be good, because we are Imago Dei. We are created in the image of God, and so it's easier to be good than it is to be bad.
Well, I love this, and with the narrative, because this is really about the teachings of Jesus. And he said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah,
Love others as I have loved you.
yeah,
Turn the other cheek. All the things that he taught were so opposite the world system, where it's all about me and I'm always right and all the things. And so I hope, at least within faith communities, we can encourage one another, as the Bible teaches us to, and many other books of faith, to to think of others first, be kind and to be gentle and to be loving. And wouldn't our world be a whole different place if that were the case? And speaking of love,
yes,
I want to get to your story,
yes, yes,
because I loved what I saw. You did a podcast with Tim Tebow, the amazing Tim Tebow, and
yeah,
I saw. I know. I want to hear about that. In kind of the descriptive of that was when love is a trap. So Tanya, you were sexually abused by a family member from the age of 7 to 14. Then you met a handsome older man. Floor is yours. Tell us your story.
yes, yes. I did. I didn't know what love was, and that's kind of like where that title came from. Like, I didn't have a foundational. I didn't have a foundational grid on true love and what that felt like. And so when I met my trafficker in an amusement park, I mentioned to him, some of the things that happened to me when I was a little girl. Like, for example, what happened between the ages of 7 and 14. And when I did that, he said to me something no one else ever said to me, and that was, "I'm sorry that happened to me." Like, I'm sorry that happened to you. And he looked at me, it, eyes locked in, feeling like soul to soul. I felt seen, validated, loved, like all the things that I dreamt what love could feel like. Because, growing up as a child, I didn't have the nurture, the care. Now, the support, as far as like, making sure, I was fed 3 meals a day, went to school, so it wasn't, in that sense. It was the nurture. My mom worked constantly. I had the stepdad, a family member who, sexually exploited me as a child. And so it's not like, I had this care and love and support, and the way I was seen was not the way I felt like it was appropriate to be seen as a child, and as a maturing adult, especially when I met my trafficker, having already been involved in adult situations, right, adult content, and the story there. But my thought was like, what is the role of adults in a child's life? And I had to be the adult. So to come into this space with this man who says to me, "I'm sorry that happened to you." That's something an adult should say, right? That's something adults take responsibility and accountability. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about big tech, or we're talking about what's happening in schools, or we're talking about adults taking responsibility and acknowledging, I'm the adult, this is the way we think, and you are a well-loved child, right? And understanding that space. So I all of that came crashing in with those words. And for me, it felt like what folks talked about, love at first sight, right? Like, oh my God, this is it. Like my life had been so messy and detached from my community and, all of this. And I'm just like, wow, like love finally came for me. This is love,
Right. He was
you
like
know?
your Romeo, your Prince Charming.
Oh yeah. 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 It didn't seem too good to be true. I just thought that he was 28. I was 18. I just thought he was an adult, like a healthy one. That's what I thought. I thought this is what a husband is like. I just, I just never, I had never seen it. I never experienced it, but this is what I thought. So during the time we shared together, the times we, were together for about 4 months before he revealed to me that he was a trafficker, AKA pimp. I He was amazing. I never experienced, someone taking care of me and providing for me. I didn't have to ask for anything. He paid my bills. I didn't need my bills paid. I've always been a independent individual, as you would say, like the adult in the room. So, he would start paying my bills. I mean, and then soon enough, any relationships that I had been totally dismantled because I was totally, with him emotionally, psychologically, all of that. And so September comes around where I'm about to go to school because I had received a scholarship for the community college, local community college. And because in my mind, I was like, I don't want to be a statistic. I'm already a Black woman. I don't want to, and a single mom and, all of these things, right? I want to do something with my life and I want to give my kids. And I didn't come from being on welfare. I didn't have that, as people talk about some of those generational things. And I didn't want to start it. So I knew I was going to go to college. So I had begun right before I started school. It was a couple days before school. He gives me a call and he says to me, I want to talk to you about our future. And, I'm super excited because we had been dating for 4 months and that's good. Let's just start talking about our future. And he says to me, he said, I'm going to say a word to you and I want you to tell me what you think of when I say the word. And I'm like, okay. And he says, madam. And I'm like, I don't know, stagecoaches in the 1820s. Those are the words I say. And I promise you, I think Francine Rivers heard my story because when she opens up her film Redeeming Love, there are stagecoaches going, and then it says 1820 at the bottom. I'm like, I think she's heard my story because that's exactly
Absolutely.
what I said.
Great
And
book, great movie.
yeah, oh my God, I've read it, had book clubs and all that. But so anyway, he says, "Good try again, madam." And I say, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's an older woman who takes care of younger women and she promises to protect them. And, I guess, the younger women, they have sex and she gives for money. And they give her the money, like it's that kind of thing. And, they all live together in this house or whatever. And he says, yeah, exactly. And he says, my mom is a madam. And when he says that to me, I'm like anyone else, like, oh, like I literally thought stagecoaches in 1820s. I didn't think any of that still exists today. And my mind was like train wreck. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, I wish I still had friends so I could tell them what I'm hearing right now. And, but I had to remain the responsible adult, right? Like, I didn't want to seem immature, like I didn't know, right? So he's sharing with me, he's like, mom gave me the business and, he's kind of going on about it. And I'm like, I can't believe what I'm hearing, right? So I let him talk and he was like, I think I want you, I've been watching you. I'm going to want you come in to our business and, help manage it, the money side. I've seen you with your son, you take care of your house, you're so young, but who would think that, you are, running your home, all of that, and, he said, I'd like to bring you on as my queen. Now we know today that a queen is the bottom, right? It's the most loyal. It's your ride or die. It's a pimp's ride or die. I had no knowledge of any of this. I didn't know the pimping and hoeing world.
Well, describe to us what the queen is then.
Yeah. So, well, the queen in a trafficking situation, especially when there's this network of traffickers, normally the queen is like the mother or the big sister or the one that is with the trafficker, right? And so who's going to go down when law enforcement come? The queen, the bottom. Those names can be used interchangeably, right? So that's who you'll see on the television screen, when there's a female trafficker. Well, she was probably trafficked, right? And now she's older. That's basically what has happened, right? Um, but she's the one who will take the blame and the fall, and she agrees to that. So, but anyway, so I didn't know any of this. I didn't know the culture. People have to understand that this is a culture. What you see online happening, even when it comes to, posting pictures or, when you talk about like kids taking pictures of their feet and posting them, right? That's a thing. Or women doing this, or men probably, I don't know. But, it becomes like a culture. There are societal norms that you come to know what you should and shouldn't do to get away with something. It's about getting away with it, right? And then when you create this culture, you have this commonality of we're doing this together, or this not the camaraderie of we're doing this together, right? To get away with it. You see what I'm saying? And so, so there was this whole thing with he's like telling me all about, they recruit. I wouldn't have to worry about recruiting. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And he said, well, why can't you do this? And I share this for a reason. Um, he said, well, why can't you? I said, because I'm not a hoe. I said, just like that. He says, you're not. I said, no, I don't. I mean, there are some things that, I was promiscuous and, in school because of my past. I mean, this is what I'm thinking in my mind. I mean, I understand why I did what I did, but I'm not like a out there hoe, right? I'm like being in my trauma type of, thing happening here. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Continue. Yeah.
Yeah. And I say that because it's a mindset. These are biases that we have about people we meet. And he taught me a lesson because I'm very introspective. And so he said to me afterwards, he said, oh, you're not a hoe. I said, no. And he says, well, how many guys have you slept with up till now? Well, there had been a lot because I was a troubled child, there had been a lot, it was very promiscuous. And he was like, I even had an STD at the time. Like I'm not at that time, but as a teenager, which was I mean, like, and I told him all of this very first night we met at the amusement park. And he was like, and you have a child, your baby's father, like, what is he doing? You're on welfare. Like, my girls are getting paid for what they're doing. So who's the real hoe? Judgment check. That is what happened to me. I didn't think, oh, he's trying to manipulate me. I didn't think about it. This is a man I've been dating who's had me on cloud 9 for 4 months.
And you think you're in love with him, right? Or you are in love with him?
I am in love with him. Absolutely. Whatever love I can drum up and feel, that is what I was doing. And he was making sure he was catering to that and making and stewarding that. He was stewarding that well.
Oh, and he
So
was grooming you the whole time, just giving you all this back like you had never had before. And that was, don't you think that was part of gaining your trust and
100%.
grooming you in a way that is extraordinary to hear this story of yours, Tanya?
Yeah, he never had the intention of loving me. That was never his intent.
Right.
His intent was to exploit me, to use me for his own benefit, for his own good, whatever good was for him. Period.
Right. To be his queen.
To be his queen, to take the fall for him. So he never gets caught or get in trouble. Right. So he can keep his culture. This is the culture of it. This is what you do. This is your job. You know, I'm the ride or die. And if when things come down to it, I will die. He will ride and I will die. Right. So that's the culture.
So he lured you into this now. You bought into the lie, right? How did this, what happened next? How did this change your relationship with him? What were you, what was going through your mind when you're out there being trafficked by this guy? And because you went from one place to another place. And how long were you in that place? I'm going to hear a little bit more about what that was like for you, not to get into the gutter with it, the horrors of it, but to understand what these girls go through, right? Because once you get put out, if you will. Um,
Yeah. Well, I was trafficked for about 18 months altogether.
okay.
And what is important, like I said earlier, for people to understand that this is a culture.
Right.
So you have your own culture, your set norms, your rules. What happens when you break them psychologically, emotionally within the culture you're in, right? And so these are things to remember. And so that's just, I think people miss that most. And because there's a sense of belonging that's created, a sense of, they don't want you, but we do. Right. They say that you're a mess, but you're our best.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's that, making things that are wrong seem right. Right. And so that's the mentality and mindset you're in. And it felt great. I wasn't trying to leave my trafficker in the beginning because it seemed like he was my protector. And I didn't believe that his intention was different than what he said. I believe that, protection was what I needed as a child. And so what they do, they learn your story and then they figure out how to, that's why coercion is, being one of the three components of human trafficking: force, fraud, and coercion. That's why that's so important, because you can't really prove coercion.
Mhm.
You can't say, hey, look right here. You have to, it's over a matter of time where you're understanding, wow, it's so psychological. And, you just can't believe, the thought never comes that this person is tricking you, because who puts that much time and effort in being coercive or manipulative? And so, through the entire time, in the beginning, things were, he was making money off of me, putting me in harm's way, but still praising and protecting me. But there's a part of this culture that people don't understand. And it's that, you know, you want the person you're cultivating to finally be in a place of full surrender. Well, they will do anything you tell them to do without question. And every person has their day. And I had mine. And so after that moment of him breaking me, breaking the very soul of me to surrender completely to his will, things became in things were already dangerous, but at that point things shifted. We weren't doing the affirmations. We weren't, there were the punishments that were different from before. Like, things just really started snowballing fast. And I knew that, because I had a son who went to night care, um, you know, I began to, like, really see where his life was, could be in danger. And, my eyes were, really became open. And folks can definitely, if they, I have my stories like all over the place, in which I am writing a memoir. So hopefully it'll be done by next year. It'll be nice to have it done sooner than that, but I'm working on a couple of projects. Well, they would be able to really walk through a lot of things that I was thinking, and, really get into the trenches of this. So I really want people to understand, because that's why it's happened for so long, and there was no accountability. No one was really questioning, because yeah, and I'm sorry to shift. I was just thinking, I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she said, I think it's interesting that she said, you think this was your fault. And I said, yes, there is the component of consent, where I did consent to something. Did I want to? No. I never saw myself as a prostitute. I always saw myself as being prostituted. I was doing this for him, for the hope of love, for the hope of a future. Now, if I could do something on my own, I would never choose this for myself. Why would I do that? Like, raise your hand if you want your daughter involved in sex work or prostitution. Like, I really want to see those people. No one wants that. I didn't want that for myself at all. No one wants this, to be treated like this, day after day, night after night, to be treated in this way. It's violence. Sweden, they have their, prostitution is violence against women.
I'm glad you said that.
Period.
Yeah, because there's so much misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Of what this is really all about. And I applaud you for being so vulnerable and transparent, because, I'm even seeing things that I didn't quite understand myself. So I appreciate you sharing this. Now, when you were in this 18-month period, did you have any friends, not in the culture, not in the space, of trafficking, pimps, the other girls, etc., that you could talk to, or that you did talk to?
Not at all. When the moment when he asked me to be a part of this, and I was like, I'm not a hoe, that part of the story, he hung up on, well, he said to me, he said, well, I'm going to give you time to think about it, and I'll call you back. And then that was it. I didn't hear from him in like 2 weeks. Within that moment of time, I went from cloud nine to hell. Like, every suicidal thought I had prior to that was there. I was weak and just vulnerable, and I went to school, people saw me, but I was not the happy-go-lucky, Tanya at all. I had a friend come to me. She came to me and she said, what is going on with you? Because even on my bad days, it's not that bad. Because I'm just an optimistic person. And I looked at her and I thought, my first thought was, I can't even tell her that, like, 1820s and stagecoaches are real. Like, I can't even, where do I start? Like, who, it was so unbelievable. And then how could I tell her that me, like, in high school, even though my life was a mess, people were still always inspired by me, because I was like in school, we had the news, early morning news. So I was one of the journalists. It was like, and I was pregnant at the time in high school. And, I was just still very ambitious, and, wanted to do things and doing things. So yeah, me of all people. So how do you do that? How do I say, let me run this business transaction I just got from my boyfriend by you?
There's not a business plan. He just told me about it. It's like, yeah.
Right. But that's how he presented it.
How this? He makes a percentage and I'm his queen. What?
How do you do that? Yeah. So I wanted to. I know for sure if the right person came along, because when he said to me on the bench at that amusement park, I'm sorry that happened to you, he had my entire heart. the whole thing. It was up for grabs, right? And that honestly is all I was looking for. I was looking to be seen, validated, loved, all of the belong, hugged, you know,
Yeah,
all of those things that we all want,
exactly.
right? I just needed to know that someone would see me. And, people could go listen to my story, but that's what happened with the law enforcement officer. I felt that, in my exit, I ran into a law enforcement officer and he saw me. And I was like, yes, I don't want to be in this. Right. So I know I would have responded.
Yes. So tell us about the law enforcement officer, your rock bottom. How did you meet the law enforcement officer, and how did he help you escape this? I don't know if you thought it was a nightmare at the time, if you'd gotten to the point where you thought it was a nightmare, but tell us that part of the story and how you came out of it and then got into your work.
Yeah, I definitely was at a part, after the breaking, um, that a trafficker does to get you to surrender. Um, things became very dark. When people use the term, I went dark or we're going dark. That was at this moment in my life. And so I just had a moment where I was abducted by a buyer, and he pulled me into this area. It was like chain link fence, and I think I was with a parking lot that had like all these potholes, and it was like the worst parking lot ever. And they should have tore it down years ago. And so we go in there, and it's like maybe probably 4 in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, and he demands my money. And so we have this toggle back and forth because that's not something I can do. I can't give him, my money, because that goes to my trafficker. And so he pulls out a knife and we're tuggling. And I'm from Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl, and we think we can do anything. Like, I will take you out of parking lot. That's like a thing we say. Right? My Vaseline's in the trunk, and I can take my earrings off and all that. But we're doing this, we're tuggling or struggling there, and I hear a voice on my right side, like the window is up, and I don't know, it's just for some reason it just seemed to amplify the voice. And the voice said, "What do you do when you have a son?" It was a male voice, it was very loud, and it took over my whole thought. And it was like there was veils on my eyes and my mind, and the whole thing dropped. Like, and I was aware where I wasn't before. I just had one thing on my mind. I will die with this money. I will not go back to my trafficker wherever he finds me, because I don't know where I was in the DMV area. And this veil drops, and I remember that my son at that moment, he was at night care with the rest of the kids. And if I died that night, like, no one would know where my son was. No one, no, except my trafficker. And then the life my son would have. And I mean, at that, the mama bear comes out. I didn't even know the mama bear existed, but it was like all the caring and nurturing that I wanted in my life was present. And, I, push him off of me, give him the money. And, he pushes me out the car. And, at one moment I'm just, crying, mad at God. Cause, I tell people, we prayed to God to help us meet our quota,
Oh
and
my
God
goodness.
answered. I'm just saying, that's just what happened.
Yeah.
And I was, oh my God, I was so upset with God. I'm like, we were, I'm crying out loud. And then, I stand up and I realize my emptiness. I realize my state of being. I'm helpless, hopeless. And then I put my hands in the air and I scream and I say, God, and I scream, I say God's name out loud with my hands up in the air. And when I did that, I hear the whoop, whoop, the car, the police car. And I go, oh my God, great. Now I'm going to jail. It's like, okay. But I walk over to the sidewalk. He's motioning for me to come over. And slowly going over, and he's like yelling out the window, and he's like, what are you doing out here? And I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, why is he asking me a question like that? He sees what I'm wearing, I'm just really annoyed. And he calls me closer and then he points at me and he says, what are you doing out here? Those words resonated because my mind goes back to the car. Like, what are you doing? Like, it was questioning my soul. Like, it was looking at the inner me, not what are you outwardly doing out here, but what are you inwardly doing with your life right now? you know, what's going on? Like all of that was packed in his question. But the thing when he said it, it was like the father, it was like the big brother, like, this is not you,
He saw
you know,
you. He really saw you.
he saw me and I felt it. And I say that to law enforcement when I'm telling a story and I'm talking to law enforcement, which I love doing, um, because they're the front lines. They see us, but I want them to see us. He saw me and he didn't respond to my behavior or trauma. He responded to me. That's all I needed. I needed someone to see me, to let me know that in spite of the mess, you still belong.
You still have
And
value.
I still have value and worth, and we want you a part of the world. Welcome, like all of those things. And I always say, as law enforcement, it's like the law enforcement's best thing is when, someone just gives all the information. And I'm like, but this is my name, this is where I live, this is my trafficker. Well, I didn't say trafficker at the time, but this is the guy who's hurting me. I'm like saying all this stuff. And, so he brings me into his cop car. Law enforcement are not always good people. We have bad people in every profession. But we have good people, great people as well. And he did not make me feel less than human. He took me in the back of his car, police car, covered me, let me sleep until he got off his shift, took me to the bus station. I had no ID, no money, but I was able to go get my son and then, go home. And so on my way home on the bus, I remember looking out the window and seeing this empty house just in the woods on this land somewhere. I'm, from South Jersey. And so it was like this land was this beautiful white house back in the woods, all this land. And I thought, such a shame. Like, when I'm out of this, when I'm done, I'm going to figure this out. And I will just never forget where I've come from. And I'm going to do my best to work for people like me. That's what I'm going to do. If I can get out of this, I promise I will do that. And I would say, I've definitely worked on other issues as well. Because my thought on the bus was not what just happened to me, but what happened to me in my entire childhood. And that if I could get respite or care to work on those things, then everything else would fall into place. And so that's why human trafficking is an issue. We shouldn't be buying and selling people. I mean, I shouldn't even be saying that, right? It just shouldn't be a thing, but also some of the other things that leads to it, like the prerequisite of being trafficked, right? Like the vulnerabilities, the things that kids go through, as children are unacceptable and should never happen anywhere in the world. Because it's like to be a child is just beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to grow and learn, and kids should be able to do that without the fear of big tech or the fear of predators.
Yeah, or a family member sexually abusing and exploiting them, because once you're sexualized as a child, your innocence has been robbed, stolen, which, and we know this from data, Tanya, you know this, I know this, that now you become more vulnerable to another situation of exploitation, abuse, even rape, trafficking, whatever. And some of this can just start with with exposure to pornography, even that sexualizes a child, and all of these things make us so vulnerable. So now you've gone, you're seeing the White House, you've heard a voice, you've God really sent you a kind police officer who saw Tanya, and you're like, you've had a change of heart, and now you go into a healing time of recovery. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we're going to get to your work now. And what do people need to know and understand when we look at issues like trafficking, and what can be done to
Yeah.
prevent it and to help those who are caught up in it?
Yeah. My road to healing uh, was long because, as I shared earlier, there were there were many layers, right? And so, because I was a single mom for a long time, all of my thought and nurturing and all the things I needed for myself, the protection, wisdom, and just providing for my basic needs went to my kids. And so, and that was let me tell you, I am so grateful. I tried to commit suicide so many times. Having my kids in my life has been the grace of God, really, which is why I'm such a big proponent of, pro-life. I, had opportunities to abort, and I am not never ashamed to say that I am pro-life. People do their thing, and whatever people believe is what they believe. But for me, that was God's grace in my life. It really, really was. And so I lived to protect them, to give them, the nurture and support. So I really didn't come into like a healing space until to really be able to heal until my kids were like in high school, or I would say middle school, high school, where they started to trigger me, because of some of their own behaviors. And you just can't, because I wanted to love them well, I had to go get some support, from counseling and all of that. But still, it's funny, because even during my counseling experience, which is fine, you know, at that time, there still wasn't, I didn't even bring up the fact that this happened in my life. We worked on the other childhood abuses because I felt like what happened with me being trafficked um, was definitely a result of, but I just didn't feel like they were able to see it through my perspective, like what happened versus what society tells them what happened. And I didn't want to educate at that moment because I didn't even know how to. Right. So,
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
So, it took a while. And so I would say that about 2011, 2012, I started hearing about human trafficking and understanding that there was language for what happened to me. And I was just so glad to be able to start advocating. I began to work in Washington on I began to work in Washington on legislation, the TVPA. I was appointed to the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking for 2 terms. And, you know, to be able to speak to policy and legislation and programming and see a change in your lifetime, for me as a survivor, told me that anything is possible.
Right. And that your pain was counting for something
Oh, yeah.
than you. And to me, I think that's so important. I mean, you see in our space and in our movement, whether it's trafficking or exploitation or whatever, or, Brandon Guffey's out fighting, to keep kids safe on social media, and where his son committed suicide because of sextortion. It's how when we hit that rock bottom and we cry out to God, as you did, as I did too, in my story, and we say, take this pain and make it count for something bigger than me to make a difference. And he does. And look at what he's done in your life, Tanya. And you have an understanding that I don't have for these young women who do very similar things and are going through these things where they feel like there's so much shame they already feel, but in society puts on them because of terms like hoe or prostitute and everything, that it's really not that at all.
Yeah, the accountability is the biggest piece. Like, we lived in a world where when things happen to people, and when it comes like me, and I say that, I mean people in vulnerable situations for whatever reason, right? So when things happen to us, especially when it comes to sexual assault, sexual exploitation, things like that, that accountability doesn't exist for the other person, for the person who put that onto me, and at the same time, it's still my responsibility to hold myself up by my bootstraps and live in the world as if that didn't happen. And that's because they don't, there's not the understanding of, like, we're talking about the innocence, but I believe that it's the dignity part. That's what's for sale. What's for sale is, the taking of my own will, the taking of my own autonomy for someone else, to perform for someone else without my consent, right? Like, you know, and so that's what's for sale, my will, the purchase of my will. And so, yeah, that is the problem, right? Exploiting a person's will.
Tanya, I want to talk a little bit, just for a minute, about the Johns and the demand side. I'm not sure what your situation was and the kind of men who were,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you were having to perform for, that you put you out there for, and you can describe that. But I also want to paint this picture of who are the Johns. I mean, I think certainly one of the things that the Epstein situation has shown us is that they can be anybody. They can be rich
Yes.
and famous. They can be billionaires. They can be a prince. They can be a doctor, a lawyer. And we see this even, with sporting events. It's usually just people who have money can get a ticket to the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And trafficking comes in. So what are we doing about the demand side and the John side? And why aren't they being held accountable?
Yeah, because we never held them accountable, so we don't know what that looks like in our world and how it will affect the economy.
No,
That's the answer.
right. It's like if you're doing this. I remember when Enough is Enough started way back, I'm talking 92. These are a bunch of women, right? They would film guys going into strip clubs and, adult bookstores and stuff like that, saying, "What's your church going to think about? What's your wife?" I mean, they started exposing some of this stuff, and it did start to change some behavior. But I mean, I hope that all this comes out on Epstein. But I'm really concerned about the fact that it's always the woman's fault.
It is, yeah. It's fun. It goes back to us being human and our dignity and our will. Because if you think about it, women, we bring people here to the planet.
Mhm.
We should be honored and respected and reverend. Like that is special. We, have to, our bodies, our entire lives as women, we're like, has to prepare itself most of our lives to have babies and to nurture and to love. We nurture communities,
Mhm.
right? And so, to take that and to make that evil, to be against us and violate us is so evil. That is evil because we bring in life. So why would you want to violate that? Even to me, the act of abortion, right? That's it's so violent against life and us as life givers. That's who we are. And so to me, it's an attack against that, right? And so we just have to redefine and rethink when we talk about we the people, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and what that means for all of us. We all get to have that. We all are Imago Dei. Every one of us. And so we have to see each other as that, not as someone I can make money off of or someone I can, use and I can manipulate or get them to do the things that I want to do. Right?
Tanya, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think of the innocent children who are, being turned out on the streets and sexually abused and whatnot, at very, very young ages. And we haven't even gone to that yet. And that's probably another conversation. But as we wrap up, what advice, our focus at Enough is Enough is preventing the internet enabled exploitation of children and women. Um, and but I want to just focus a minute on prevention. We know that trafficking and exploitation is happening online and offline. But for parents listening, when they think, I've never heard a story like this, and there are probably girls in my daughter's church or high school or college that may be experiencing this. What advice would you give them, and what would the warning signs be, and how should they respond?
Well, first, I think when we're talking about warning signs, a lot of times I tell parents, if you already see some of the warning signs we say, it's too late. Now it's just time to like rush in, right? But you know, kids, like you heard in my story, kids, and remember what it was like when you were a kid. You wanted the attention of your parents, period. Right? It doesn't matter as a parent how good you are or how bad you think you are. Your kids still want to be like you. So if they see you disrespect, they're going to disrespect. If they see you love, they're going to love. You know, if they see you loving them, they're going to receive that. There are these like reams that go around, these little short video clips of dads teaching their daughters to do things, and they say, "Well, we're teaching them to do their own tires, so some knucklehead won't come and teach my daughter how to do a tire," and they think that's what a man is, right? So we as parents are the gatekeepers. We were when they were inside of us as moms. And then we had them, we were that gatekeeper. And then now they're coming out. They have two parents, whatever that looks like. It's your job, period. So what does that look like for you and your family? And so the preventative side is to be approachable to your kids and be approachable to your kids' friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's huge. My kids' friends came to me for all kinds of stuff because I was that parent. I was understanding. I'm not going to judge, where I was very clear about what I will tell and what can stay between us. But let me tell you, it's a very fine line because I'm not your mom. We would have those talks, and like, how can we have this conversation with your parents? But be that parent. Show up in your kid's life. Be a part of the PTA in your school. Just because no one's doing it anymore doesn't mean you have to follow that trend. Get in there. Advocate for your kids. Advocate for what you want your family to look like. My kids used to complain about me, about their phone, but I pay the bill. And if God wanted you to be with someone else's parent, he would have sent you there. He sent you to me, and he knew that I had the story that I have. And so this is what we're doing. And I would tell my kids, I would say, it looks like you're having a hard time managing what I thought you could manage in your life. And that's okay. But when I see that, it tells me that I need to come closer. And so we had this thing. I would say, hey, I see you. Is it time for me to come closer? They're like, no, mom, we got it. We're okay.
I got it. I'll put my phone down. I promise.
Yeah.
Dinner time. I'll put my phone down. I'll turn off the game.
Yes. They wanted independency and to show me that they could be accountable and responsible on their own.
Yeah.
Because I showed them I can be that. And I could be that for them. Anytime. That's what I'm here for. So,
And I think you're right. Not to be too busy, to always be available. And we say this on the internet safety side of things. Teach them at a young age that they can come to you and talk to you about anything, and not be afraid that you're going to freak out, you're going to judge them, and you're going to shame them. You just say, I want you to come to me with anything.
Anything.
Doesn't matter how bad you think it is, you come to me and we work through it together.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important messages that we can send to any parent and to any grandparent. I've got 5 grandkids now. Yeah. And just say, there isn't anything. I am not going to judge you. And we're going to talk through things. And I may challenge you on some things, but that's the key. I mean, there was even data and studies years ago that found that parents and kids who talked regularly about the hard stuff, and in this case, internet safety, those kids were much less likely to get. And so it's going to be our takeaway. Tanya, you have been just amazing and sharing your story. I know there's so much there. I want to talk more about, how do we solve these issues, what's going on, but we've already taken too much of your time. So would you be willing to come back another time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that would be fun. I would love to come back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. We know you've got your hands in a lot of things out there, fighting for survivors, working on policy, just doing the amazing work you do. And you're so beautiful and so articulate, and just a lovely, lovely warrior. And we thank you. And for those of us who want to follow Tanya Gould, you can find her on LinkedIn and social media. And we just ask you to share this podcast. Please share this podcast, like it, and just remember too, at Enough is Enough, we're here to help you. Primarily, our focus is protecting your children on the internet. Please go to internetsafety101.org. We've got lots of free information, parent guides, downloadables. You can watch any of our podcasts in the past, and we'll be having more in the future. And so we just thank you again for joining us today. And Tanya, thank you for joining us, and God bless you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.